May 21, 2025. OpenAI announces it's buying a company called IO for $6.5 billion. All stock. Biggest acquisition in the company's history by a wide margin, and IO had 55 employees and had never shipped a product. Sam Altman posted that he was partnering with the greatest designer in the world. That designer is Jony Ive. And Apple's stock dropped 2% that same day on the announcement of a device nobody had seen, that didn't have a name, that didn't exist yet. Hold on to that number. We're coming back to it. Because within about an hour, every tech outlet on Earth was using the same two words. iPhone killer, which is understandable, and also almost exactly backwards. And the gap between what people think this thing is and what Ive has actually said he's trying to do is, I'd argue, the most interesting story in consumer technology right now. Let's start with who's building it, because that's the part that should stop you. Jony Ive ran design at Apple for over 20 years. The iMac, the iPod, the iPad, the Apple Watch, and the iPhone. The single most commercially successful object ever manufactured. He left Apple in 2019 and started a firm called Love From. The I/O team he brought to OpenAI is stacked with his old people, Scott Cannon, Evans Hankey, Tang Tan. Hankey literally succeeded him as Apple's head of industrial design. Tan ran iPhone product design. So this isn't a startup taking a swing at Apple. This is a substantial piece of the actual team that built the iPhone, reassembled somewhere else. And they'd been at it quietly for a while before anyone knew. By the time the acquisition was announced in 2025, Ive and Altman had reportedly been working together on this for about 2 years, meaning it started somewhere around 2023, back when ChatGPT was barely a year old and OpenAI had no obvious reason to be thinking about physical objects at all. And here's what's been happening to Ive over the last decade, in public, slowly. October 2017, New Yorker Tech Fest. David Remnick asks him whether he understands how much the iPhone changed daily life and the way people's brains work. Ive doesn't celebrate. He expresses regret about how people use it. October 2018, a Wired conference. Anna Wintour asks him directly whether he feels guilty that people are addicted to their phones. And this time Ive dodges. He says you can't predict all the consequences of innovating. He says being connected is good, and that the real issue is what you do with that connection. He points to screen time, the feature Apple shipped to help you use your iPhone less, as evidence they're working on it. That's a man deflecting. Politely, elegantly, but deflecting. Now May 2025, Stripe Sessions, an hour on stage with Patrick Collison, and something has changed. Ive says that when you innovate, there will be unintended consequences, and that with certain products he was very involved with, some of those consequences were far from pleasant. He says good intentions don't get you off the hook, that if you're involved in something with bad outcomes, you need to own it. Asked point blank whether he regrets what smartphones did, he sighs and says he could not be more preoccupied by it. He also says something I keep thinking about, that he has no interest in breaking things for the sake of breaking them, because breaking things and moving on fast leaves you surrounded by wreckage. That's not a designer promoting a product, that's a man doing arithmetic on his own career. So what are they actually making? It's been positioned as a third device, not a replacement for your phone, something that sits alongside your phone and your laptop. So the honest version of the headline is this: Jony Ive isn't trying to build a better iPhone. He's trying to build something that makes you reach for your iPhone less. And that is a genuinely bizarre thing for him specifically to attempt. His entire career was spent making objects so beautiful and so tactile that people couldn't put them down. That was the job. That was the skill. Now he's trying to use the same skill in reverse. To design something so quiet you forget it's there. I have no idea if that's even possible. I'm not sure anyone does. Because the graveyard here is real. Humane's AI pin, founded by ex-Apple people, backed by serious money, positioned as the post-smartphone device, landed with a thud, and the company was sold off. Every few years, somebody announces the thing that comes after the phone, and every few years, the phone is still there. And OpenAI is not planning a modest launch. In a leaked internal conversation, Altman told staff the goal was to ship 100 million of these faster than any company has ever shipped 100 million of anything new. Reporting has put the initial production target somewhere in the range of 40 to 50 million units, with Foxconn manufacturing moved over from another supplier, and assembly expected in the United States. For scale, nobody does that. Apple has never done that. That number isn't a forecast, it's a statement of intent, and it tells you this is not a side project or a design exercise. OpenAI is trying to become a hardware company in one move. If you want more videos like this one, subscribing genuinely helps. Now, the part that hasn't aged well. In January of this year at Davos, OpenAI's policy chief said the company was on track to unveil the device in the second half of 2026. He wouldn't say what it was: pin, earpiece, something else. He wouldn't commit to it going on sale. 3 weeks later, a court filing told a different story. There's a trademark lawsuit from an audio startup called IYO, and in the filings, OpenAI stated its first hardware device wouldn't ship to customers before the end of February 2027. It also said it had produced no packaging and no marketing materials, and it confirmed it had abandoned the name IO entirely, for the device, for the advertising, for all of it. So the biggest acquisition in OpenAI's history bought a company whose name they then had to stop using for a product that's now slipped past its original window from a team that hasn't shipped anything yet. None of that means it fails. Hardware is brutally hard, and delays are normal. The original iPhone was a mess internally right up until it wasn't. But it does mean we're 4 years into this collaboration, $6.5 billion in, and the public evidence is still a promotional video and a court document. And there's a tension in the premise itself I can't get past. The device is supposed to be calm, restrained, designed to take up less of your attention, and it's being built inside the company that is arguably the single biggest driver of the fastest technology deployment in modern history. A company whose entire business depends on you using its product constantly. Maybe Ive's presence is exactly the correction that needs. That's the optimistic read, and it's not a stupid one. Or maybe the man who spent 20 years making the most attention-capturing object ever built is now attaching his reputation to a company that needs your attention even more than Apple did, and calling it a fix. I honestly go back and forth, so tell me in the comments, is this redemption? Or is it the most expensive apology anyone has ever issued? Back to that 2%. On the day this was announced, Apple lost real money on the stock market because Jony Ive went to work somewhere else. That's how much his name is worth. Not a product, not a demo, a name attached to an idea. The original iPhone went from serious internal work to a stage in Steve Jobs' hands in roughly 2.5 years. Ive and Altman have been at this longer than that, and the ship date keeps moving, which might tell us something about what they're actually attempting. Building a device people can't put down turns out to be the easy version.